Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 7th of May of 2026. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine. Currently this is already the evening of the 7th of May of 2026, and this means just one thing, that there are just several hours before the beginning of the Russian ceasefire. I started making this video in the evening, so just several hours and the Russian ceasefire will come in force. But the question is whether the Ukrainians are going to accept this ceasefire or the Ukrainians are going to violate this ceasefire. This is the most important question we've been discussing probably since the beginning of this week. And now let's try to understand what is going to happen at 12 p.m. at 12 a.m. of the 8th of May of 2026. As of the moment when I started making this video, we received a very important updates. The Ukrainians this evening on the 7th of May of 2026 launched the next wave of drones, and this is the map that was published around at 5 p.m. of the Ukrainian time. As you can see, dozens of arrows. Some of them were moving in the direction of the southern regions of Russia, and some of them were moving in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation, the city of Moscow. The pro-Ukrainian source that published this picture reported that this evening up to 260 drones were recorded. So this is a very important picture. We need to save this picture in our memory, and let's discuss another important number. This is not the first wave of attack during the 6th and the 7th of May of 2026. Yesterday the Ukrainians launched the first wave, and the Russians this morning stated that during the previous night, overnight, the Russians intercepted and destroyed 347 drones. When summarizing every single report that the Russians have published since the beginning of the 6th of May of 2026, the Russians have already destroyed more than 600 drones, and the Ukrainians continue launching them and the Russians continue destroying them. So as we can see, and as we discussed during the previous video, and according to media, Zelensky hasn't made a final decision yet. So he doesn't know for sure whether he is going to make a final strike during the 9th of May or the 8th of May or not. But despite the fact whether he is going to make this final decision, final order or not, as we discussed during the previous video, the Ukrainians first of all need to maintain a corridor. So they need to have this corridor, and they need to send hundreds of drones through this corridor just with the purpose to maintain it and not to allow the Russians to reload their air defense systems. They need to send hundreds of drones these days during the 6th, during the 7th, during the 8th, during the 9th of May of 2026, just with one purpose, to prepare this corridor. And if Zelensky makes this decision to attack the territory of the city of Moscow during the 9th of May of 2026. And the most important question, that's the 9th of May, is going to start only the day after tomorrow. And the question is whether the Ukrainians are going to accept the Russian ceasefire or they're going to violate this ceasefire within the first seconds. And to receive the answer to this question, we need to return back to this picture once again. The Ukrainians launched their drones. This report was published somewhere at 6 p.m. of the Ukrainian time. And according to the speed, according to the technical characteristics of the Ukrainian drones, we believe that these drones will get the city of Moscow either somewhere around in the area between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m. So basically this is the batch of drones that, according to the technical characteristics of these drones, could violate the Russian ceasefire probably within a minute when this ceasefire enters its force. And this is the most important thing, that the Ukrainians have already launched the drones that could violate the Russian ceasefire during not maybe even first minutes, but during the first seconds of the Russian ceasefire, which will obviously send the Russians a message that Ukrainians are not going to accept anything from the Russian side. And if you decided to attack the city of Kyiv with Oreshnik, then you can do this. This is like the message from the Ukrainian side, that they don't care about this and so on. The Russians during the previous 24 hours made lots of statements. We have already discussed one of them. Let's discuss this statement once once again, the spokesperson of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Zakharova, stated that the European Union is gravely mistaken if it thinks it can silence Zelensky's public threats to strike Moscow. And the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs called once again on foreign authorities to evacuate their citizens and diplomats from Kiev in advance. So which means that the Russians most likely believe that the Ukrainians will violate ceasefire, probably at the beginning of this ceasefire, during the first seconds of this fire, which means that the Russians most likely will have no other option but to attack the territory of Kiev. And the European leaders and European authorities responded to the request or demand from the Russian side. The Europeans stated that the European Union will not evacuate its diplomats from Kiev following Moscow's warnings of a possible escalation on May 9th. We will not change our position or presence in Kiev. Russian attacks, unfortunately, are a daily reality both for Kiev and other parts of Ukraine. But we see, and as we discussed during the previous video, we have a significant difference between this, the current 9th of May, and the 9th of May of the previous years. This year, nobody came to Ukraine. We are talking about European politics. Of course, there are still lots of time for this, and maybe the European politicals will come to Kiev tomorrow on the 8th of May or the day after tomorrow on the 9th of May. But as of the evening of the 7th of May of 2026, and more precisely as of the moment when I started making this video, we hadn't received anything on this matter. Neither the Chancellor of Germany Merz, nor the President France Macron, nor the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom Keir Starmer, nor the European Union politicals reported that they were willing to come to Ukraine to support the Ukrainians and Zelensky himself. So we don't have it, which means that they're not going, but maybe everything will change within the next hours. And of course, there is another possible solution, that Zelensky himself will leave the territory of Ukraine and he will move to the European countries, and most likely this is a scenario. And of course, this is going to be a very important signal, because if we receive today an information that the Ukrainians is leaving the territory of Ukraine, this means that most likely the Ukrainian strike on the territory of the city of Moscow will be inevitable, because Zelensky will try to stay on the safe side during these attacks, trying to stay away from the territory of Ukraine and not to be hit by the Russians. As for the Russian side, they are not changing their positions. As we discussed during the previous video, the Russians have reinforced their air defense forces in the area of the city of Moscow significantly. Currently, we can say that the city of Moscow is the most protected city through the entire world. The Russians deployed hundreds of air defense systems, radars, with the purpose to bring down anything that moves in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation, which means that from the first side, most likely the Russians will be able to protect the city of Moscow, but most likely the Russians were forced to weaken other cities and towns through the territory of the Russian Federation, where most likely we might see damages and explosions during the next days, and first of all during the 9th of May of 2026. The Russians stated that Russia's ceasefire will remain in effect on May 8th and 9th. The Russians are not changing their position. The ceasefire declared by Russia in honor of Victory Day celebrations will remain in effect on May 8th and 9th. This was announced at the briefing by Russian Presidential Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov. For example, the Kremlin has published a list of heads of foreign delegations arriving in Moscow to celebrate Victory Day: President of the Republic of Abkhazia, President of the Republic of Belarus, President of Laos, Lao People's Democratic Republic. So as we can see, the list is very short, and there are several presidents, but not so many as we used to see a year ago. The Russians also stated the main statements of Putin's age Ushakov. The May 9th parade will take place with President Putin's speech, everything as usual, except for the demonstration of the military equipment. The President of Belarus and other foreign guests will participate in the May 9th event. So many other different things. Robert Fico will arrive. The President of Russia will have lots of meetings. So everything as usual and so on. So as you can see, the Russians are confident that they will be able to protect the city city of Moscow despite the drones that the Ukrainians are launching. So let's wait and see what is going to happen next. Obviously, the Russian ceasefire will take an effect within the next hours, and then we will understand everything. And the most important thing, whether the Ukrainians will violate this ceasefire within first seconds or they will wait for several hours. But everything depends on the drones and their technical characteristics. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of interesting, weird and strange updates. And first, let's talk about strange updates. A very important video, to my opinion, was published today, this evening, from the Chernihiv region. And this is the video I'm talking about. And here, the pro-Ukrainian sources published and reported that a very big fire currently is taking place in the northern parts of the Chernihiv region. So as you can see, a very big forest is under fire, as you can see, and the question is, what is happening here? Ukrainians are saying that the fire broke out after the Russians attacked this theater with aviation or with artillery systems. Maybe an ammo depot was destroyed, but telling the truth, the fire is too big, to my opinion, and who knows, maybe this is something like a special operation from the Russian side, because now, due to the fact that the forest is covered with this smoke, most likely the Ukrainian drones are blind. They don't see anything, they can't see anything, and probably even satellites can't see anything in this area. So which means that the Russians may use this situation, and on the night, because most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to stabilize the situation in this area within the next day or something like this, because the situation is critical, it's a disaster, and maybe the Russians may use this advantageous situation to carry out unexpected fast lightning attack in the northern parts of Chernihiv region with the purpose to improve their position significantly in this area. Who knows? Now let's move further and let's talk about the Sumy direction. As for this area, during the previous 24 hours, lots of videos were published by pro-Russian sources of how the Russians were bombing temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine through the entire line of combat contact, not just in the Sumy region, but without significant changes, or at least without any changes on the ground. Another video was published from the settlement of Ryasne. In this video, we can see how the Russians attacked and destroyed a building in the central part of the city. We colored the settlement of Ryasne several days ago based on the reports that were published by pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian sources. So that is why we believe that either the Ukrainians counterattacked or not the entire settlement of Ryasne is under control of Russians. So let's wait and see. Most likely there are very heavy clashes, but the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation hasn't published any report about control over the territory, which means that most likely the settlement of Ryasne is not under complete control of Russians. The Kharkiv direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 5th of May of 2026, and this is the situation by the end of the 7th of May of 2026. As you can see, the Russians, as a result of clashes, improved their position significantly around this big forest, the biggest forest in the northeastern part of Kharkiv region, where the Ukrainians concentrated significant number of forces. This forest is located on the strategic elevation, and now we see that the Russians are trying to encircle the forest, moving around the territory from the west and from the east. The Russians improve their positions around the settlement of Izbitska. These are the changes, and the Russians improve their positions between the villages of Verkhnya Pisarevka, Shesterevka and Losovka. So these are the changes on the ground in this area. The Russians are trying to encircle the forest, of course, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back, and if Russians take this territory under complete control, the Russians will be able to begin concentration of huge forces right in front of the city of Kharkiv. And from these positions, of course, the Russians will continue offensive operation further during the summer military campaign, and most likely, if this forest falls, we'll see significant changes within the next months during the summer military campaign. As for this flank, the Russians are completing two tasks. The first one is is the encirclement of this forest, and the second one is that we see that the Russians can now attack the Ukrainians from behind through their main defense layer around the settlement of Белые Колодец. So the clashes are taking place for the settlements of Losivka and Shesterenka, and from these positions the Russians will continue offensive operation towards Ukrainska and Pilna, and then this will lead to complete collapse of the entire Ukraine's defense in this area. Along the border, additional changes were also recorded. These are the changes. Pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians have improved their position significantly in this area, and there is just a small part of this forest remains under complete Ukrainian control. But it seems that according to the current pace of offensive and according to current position of this territory, most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold the most northeastern parts under complete control for a very long period of time. And we have changes through the eastern flank of the Kharkiv direction. These are the changes on the ground between the previous 2 days. So this is the end of the 5th of May, this is the 6th of May, and this is the 7th of May. So as you can see, according to these changes, the Russians are moving in the direction of the villages of Khatnya, Zarubovka, Volkhovatka, and Anishchina. So it seems that the Russians are trying to take these villages under complete control and answer the space operation space between the settlements of Veliki Burluk and Белые Колодец with the purpose to attack in both directions. As for Белые Колодец, to attack from behind. As for the settlement of Veliki Burluk, to block the settlement from any maneuverings and any flexibility. The Kupinsk direction, no changes were recorded. The Slavinsk direction, significant number of icons, as you can see, and we have changes. The Russians, according to information we have, improved their positions around the settlement of Lyman, and these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 6th of May, and this is the end of the 7th of May of 2026. The Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Stary Karavan. The Russians are entering behind the siege of Lyman, and the Russians are tightening the news between the edge positions of in the area of Drobusheva and Stary Karavan, and currently the corridor between these two positions is already less than 12 kilometers, and even though the Ukrainians had just one corridor, a stable corridor for evacuation rotation, and we are talking about this one, and the Russians are getting closer and closer to this area. Several sources, by the way, pro-Russian sources stated that first sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armored force of the Russian Federation were already recorded around the settlement of Shurova. If Russians somehow are able to take under complete control the settlement of Shurova, or without fighting for the siege of Lyman, let's say like outflanking the siege of Lyman from the south and from the southwest, this is going to be the situation when the siege of Lyman would be encircled by Russians, completely encircled without any chances for evacuation. And this is a very important situation because we see that the Russians, if they are able to encircle the siege of Lyman, are trying to save the settlement, not to destroy every single building, but to save as many as possible, at least 40 or 50, maybe 40, maybe 30%, but this will be enough for the Russians to continue concentrating of their troops before the beginning of the main battle for the city of Slaviansk itself. Meanwhile, the Russians continue pushing the Ukrainians between the settlements of Alexandrovka, Kriva Luka, Starodubovka, and Nikolaevka. During the day, additional changes were recorded. The Russians are bombing and attacking the Ukrainians, and we see that the Ukrainians have less and less space for maneuvers and for positions under their control on the Russian sides of Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal and the river of Seversky Donetsk. The Konstantinovka direction, probably this is the first day when we haven't received anything about changes on the ground. The Russians continue offensive, the Russians continue pushing Ukrainian positions, and probably within the next days we will receive additional changes on the ground, but not today. As for the Dobropolye direction, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in the area of the city of Belitska. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of May, and this is the situation by the end of the 7th of May. The Ukrainians, as you can see, managed to counterattack and to recapture some positions through the city itself and through the southwestern flank. The Ukrainians most likely won't continue their counteroffensive. The main purpose was just to improve positions before further and more waves of the Russian attacks in this area. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing in the direction of the settlement of Sergeyevka, trying to outflank the settlement from the north and from the northeast. The Russians continue offensive operation, creating a buffer zone around the settlements of Pokrovsk, Grishino, and Mirnograd. As for the Zaporozhye direction, the most important updates are coming through the western part. The Ukrainians, as a result of a counter-offensive operation, managed to improve their position significantly, and currently the Russians, as a result of the Ukrainian counter-attack, were forced to fall back almost towards the southern parts of the city of Stepnohirsk, and most likely the Russians, under this pressure of the armed forces of Ukraine, would be forced to fall back further in the southern direction. This information was confirmed by many sources, by pro-Russian sources, by pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers, but as of the end of the 7th of May, we haven't received anything that can confirm this situation with videos or with additional publications by different sources like Minister of Defense and so on. Probably there is a counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side, but we need to wait a few days before we understand what exactly is happening here. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.